Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming. We're two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything, decided to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And this week, we really tried to come up with a topic that wasn't just talking about Space Marine 2, but we couldn't stop ourselves considering how much we have been enjoying Space Marine 2. So instead, we pivoted to coming up with a way to talk about Space Marine 2 that isn't just us screaming into a microphone and making ape noises for like 25 minutes.
And you're probably going to be watching this episode weeks after the Space Marine 2 has been released, and people have probably stopped talking about it on the internet. That's fine. We don't care. We're talking about the thing that we really enjoyed, and are still enjoying.
No spoilers will be said this episode. I will say that up front. I will not be spoiling anything, because I actually think the story is surprisingly compelling, and I don't want to crap on that for anybody. But rather, we are going to be talking about the game as a whole, and what about it we can use as an example to point at what makes a good Warhammer game versus the sea of really underwhelming or just outright bad attempts at porting the Warhammer IP into video games. Because let's be honest, there's far more misses than hits, and this one managed to hit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just an interesting topic. But first, we do have to pull ourselves out of the digital space, get out of the power armor, and talk about our hobby type and our games played. All right, John.
All right, Joe.
What have you been doing?
Space Marine 2.
I know. That's what makes this hard.
So we moved into the new space. Pardon the mess behind me.
I know that too.
Yeah, Joe helped me. So hobby time has been understandably a little hampered. But I've gotten some stuff done, so I built a Necromunda gang, and I started painting the said Necromunda gang. And so that'll be done relatively soon. I just have to really sort of dig in for the rest of it. I'm prepping a bunch of Skaven soon. That's on the docket. Infinity is also on the docket. And really, I'm just staring down the barrel of a fall time that is just going to be dominated by Conquest and Infinity while working on some Skaven.
That's amazing.
I will just, that's all I'm working on. 40K is just sort of going in the back burner almost entirely. I just don't have the time for it. And Necromunda, I'm going to work on a little bit just so I have a gang ready. And I can just play Necromunda whenever. Games played, though, I have gotten in boarding action. Played some games of boarding action with Joe here. Mm-hmm. Played a game of AOS of Cruel Boys versus Lumineth. And learned more stuff about AOS. 4th edition.
Yeah, that was a really good game.
Yep,
a lot of backy-forthy tricky stuff.
Yeah, we learned a bunch. Unfortunately, we didn't finish our game because it was during the weekday, and we'd gotten wrapped up in a lot of different conversations. But the game was still holding pretty even in a lot of ways when we ended it. So some things are going right for us. It wasn't an outright stomp in one way or the other. And then I also have played 2 games of Conquest, teaching our friend Tanner how to play Spires with my Wadroon, and just generally sort of getting used to Conquest ahead of an escalation league that we're going to help run here locally starting this fall. Which, if you're interested, reach out, by the way, just letting you know. We'll be running a tactical retreat gaming with a bunch of escalation league sort of starting at a certain point value and going up every month until people are comfortable with Conquest in general.
Yeah, we wanted to start earlier, but with the new rules drop coming in sometime in October, we thought it best to wait until after some of those really foundational changes hit for some of the factions. Because we felt like it would be really crappy to get a person in to start, and then, we teach them their first games of Wadroon, they learn their chant system, and then all of a sudden, at the end of the month of their first time ever playing Conquest, oh, by the way, your chant systems have changed fundamentally. So we're just going to push it to delay it a touch until we know what those rules changes are going to look like.
And the last one we played in was ran by our Vanguard Mark, who is a wonderful job and will still be running this one. He just asked for our help because it's a lot of people to sort of try to get in new test games or like trying to also play his own games and also trying to set this thing. So he needed some help, so we're helping him. And also just like we like to be there as part of the community, and we really want to see Conquest grow both locally and beyond because it's a really good game. And if I'm being honest, it's the game I end up playing the most recently.
For me, it's largely the same. As I said, I played with John to test some more Age of Sigmar, and I've got quite a bit more of that to do in my future. We're looking to run our next narrative event for friends and stuff in November, so we've got a little bit of time to prep, but given that it's a whole new edition and so much has changed, I really want to take the time to try to get to grips with how all of this new edition works so I can help teach other people. Now we're almost to, what are we at, 4 or 5 games of the new edition, but I need more, and I need against more armies, so... that was a really good test game, but I got more in my future. I've also been working on finishing painting my full Lumineth army. I've got about 500-ish points left to paint, so I've been working on painting up some archers, because I do think there's a place for them in the new lists. And we also played some boarding actions, because we wanted to test that out. Because there are times where the group really wants to like keep the 40k flavor, but sometimes like full 40k doesn't hit the mark or is cumbersome or what have you. And we heard about the new Boarding Actions Compendium and thought, okay, let's give it a try, see if it's a new way to maybe play with the same miniatures we all already have, but in creative ways. Went surprisingly well. Doors are fun. Orcs are fun. Who knew? So great. Although Khorne did get real angry at John. John was playing his Khorne murder dudes against my big stompy mecha orcs and failed every blessing of Khorne roll that he rolled for in that entire game. Khorne gave him no love, and it was because he showed up at the shop after work and played Khorne in a polo shirt. Not allowed.
I had to drive directly from work to the shop to play, and unfortunately that meant wearing a polo shirt.
You tried to play Khorne in a polo shirt. You didn't do any push-ups. You didn't do no freaking creatine. You didn't drink your C4 pre-workout. You didn't even have a protein shake. Like, what did you expect to happen, John? What did you expect to happen? I showed up being a silly little goose, so the orc gods, Gork and Morka, bless me. And that's why you lose. But no, Boarding Actions was really fun. And pretty short, despite all the extra rules, which was very cool. Might play more of that. Also, played some more Conquest, as is just always the case for me. I'm trying to test more of my Dwegum, after also spending quite a bit of time hobbying up my new Stone Forged. I really want that to work in my list, and I just finished building it. So I got to play that on the table for the first time in a Dwegum list I'm calling Monster Mash, where the whole point of the list is to force my list to exist in a weird space to be able to bring all monsters I own for Dwegum. So I could cram a Ironclad Drake into it, I could cram a Helldringer Drake into it, I could cram a Stone Forged into it. And yes, that means I'm bringing 4 heroes, and it was a great time. Tactically, I don't know how it'll hold up with further testing, but it won its first game, so hey, there's something. But I had a really good, like, back and forth game with our editor, Seth. And while I did duff every reinforcement roll except for 1 dice out of 10 dice, I got 1 success. He failed all the saves that mattered even more, being that his armor just turned to dust, and he fell over and died. It was pretty unfortunate, but a really good time. Looking ahead, I do have more Lumineth to paint. I also think that any time now I could pivot to start hobbying on Dwegum for that slow grow league, but the wild card for me there is if October's rules are really, really cool for Nords, I might play Nords again and just try to make the new giant stuff work.
Oh no.
What a shame. Shame. Every time we go up a point level, I add just 1 new Jotnar to my list. Delightful. The dream.
Jotnars.
Jotnars! Just here to be yoked. And I will be drinking my protein shakes before games, so I'll win mine, John. Yeah, I'm really excited to keep going, but I gotta admit, I have not gotten as much hobby done as I could have. And it's because Space Marine 2 dropped. And it has severely cut into my hobby time. And while I have gone out of my way to make decisions to still go out and see friends and do everything social, there have been times I've decided to not paint stuff because I instead want to purge Xenos scum. And I'm not sorry about it at all because it's a great time. And I think it's worth talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Play music. Okay, John, we just got to get it off. We got to rip the Band-Aid off.
Yep.
Space Marine 2's dope.
Space Marine 2's fucks. Like,
it's incredible.
I know I'm not supposed to curse on YouTube, but like, it's great.
It's so incredible. And we will not be talking about it as a video game so much as like, is it a good video game? But Space Marine 2, in a nutshell, if you have not played it, or if you aren't a video game person, you might notice that even you, as a non-video game enjoyer, are getting a lot of Space Marine 2 stuff. Mm-hmm. And if your question is, why is this so popular when that's never the case for these little wargame IPs? Largely, for me, it's been very enjoyable because it's basically Gears of War with Warhammer on top. And I cannot express how much I love that. If you want bona fides of how long we have loved that, go check out all my hardcover books on the bookshelf for Gears of War stuff. And also, when we talked about like things we think criminally do not have a war game that need a war game, Gears of War was like right at the top.
Which is still the case, I will say. Like, I know there's a Halo war game coming out that I plan on playing and trying, but a Gears of War one would sell amazingly, and I would play in a heartbeat.
I don't know if it would sell amazingly. I know I would buy like 18 copies and then force them upon all of my friends as a torture device or as gifts, both at the same time. But I do think it would be really cool. I think there's flavor there of just like big tough guys doing a lot of like big stompy stuff, but you're not totally immortal, and you know you got some big feelings involved. And Space Marine hits a lot of those notes. And I think that does a lot for it. It's also impeccably well made. They did a lot to try to optimize the game so it plays well. You know, there's a lot of reasons why it's become popular, but largely because it's fun as could be, really easy to sort of jump into, have a good time, and it plays nice and crisp. But we want to talk broader than that, though. Not just, you know, why is Space Marine 2 a good video game? And the answer is basically, you know, kind of like a nature walk because of how it is. Instead, why do we believe Space Marine 2 is a good Warhammer video game? And then use that as a vessel to compare it to other things that we consider a good Warhammer video game in the past, and those that we think are not. Because if there's one thing I think we all can agree on, it's that Space Marine 2 has struck a chord with people who aren't into Warhammer, and it gets a lot more eyes on not just Warhammer, but the hobby as a whole. And I think that rising tide could lift a lot of boats at once. So it's worth having that talk.
Yeah, I think it's so often the case that when a new Warhammer game comes, like gets announced, everyone's like, "Oh, finally, they're gonna get the thing we wanted, yeah!" And then we get the game, and you go,
This is okay if you squint your eyes and ignore a lot of things.
Wow, I really liked this, like, mobile game you gave me.
This is an okay grid game, I guess.
I guess that's an RTS for Age of Sigmar. It's not Total Warhammer 3 though. Like all sorts of those kinds of things, right? And everyone who's been in the hobby for any period of time has like had the conversation with everyone at the shop or in their Discord or with their friends of like, wouldn't a Diablo style like Age of Sigmar game be sick? You play a Stormcast or like a Chaos Warrior or like whatever, right?
They did that. It wasn't super dope.
Yeah, like, and a lot of times those things in concept you think would work really, really well together, right? You can easily just be like, yes, a Space Marine game where you do a hack and slash sort of combat style with fighting. But if it's not done right, it doesn't hit home.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do we mean by done right? Well, it's got to have a right story, it's got to have all those things, but more importantly than all that, it has to have this unspoken level of feel that you have to have in order to make that game right. And in order to get that feel, you have to decide what part of the Warhammer setting you're going to go into. And if you're going to try to get all of it, and you're not doing something like Total Warhammer for fantasy, and you're doing something like Warhammer 40k, an Eldar game, or a Gene Stealer cult game, or an Imperial Guardsman game, is very different from a Space Marine game, where you're playing a Space Marine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, you're beholden to the setting at its core.
yeah. If you make the movements too floaty and you're playing a Space Marine, it feels off. It feels wrong. Right? If you make a Space Marine game and everyone's using las guns, everyone's going, "What the hell's this?"
Yeah, I think for me, like that is the first mark of a good Warhammer game, is when the developers have decided that the setting is kind of king, and will be beholden to it for better or worse.
Mm-hmm.
And even if that means defying modern gaming habits or trends. I'll use Space Marine 2 as an example. Okay, it's Space Marine 2. When you play the game, you're gonna get pretty quickly, you're going to get a weapon like a chainsword, right? In terms of Warhammer weapons, compared to stuff like a thunder hammer or a power fist, a chainsword is a pretty quick dueling weapon, right? In 40k tabletop stuff. That's a pretty fast weapon for a Space Marine compared to their heavier arsenal. And you get it very early in Space Marine 2, as you would expect, because it's the weapon on the cover of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And even that weapon, despite being a fast dueling weapon, has big, arcing, arduous, slow swings with powerful hits and big follow-throughs that cleave through a ton of enemies, but they do not move quickly.
Mm-hmm.
In modern game design, especially fighting action games, a lot of the combat is very frantic, fast-paced, button mashy, block cancel, fighting game style inputs, where it's fast and it's furious, and you can sort of dodge out or cancel out of a lot of your attacks. And that makes it more approachable, it makes it more frantic. It's a very compelling style of game. It's why it's become pretty preeminent in the action genre. But doing so wouldn't feel like you're playing a Space Marine, where you are a giant superhuman in essentially an M1 Abrams tank plating all over your body.
Mm-hmm.
And every step is a thunky, lumbering movement. So your swings have to be huge, arcing, cleaves. And that's a risky proposition from game design perspective alone. But if you commit to the setting, it can feel correct. Same thing with walking. You're kind of slow and lumbering. Even when you hit the sprint button, you're not sprinting how you probably expected at first. You get controller vibrate to show that you're moving quicker. You do start to pick up speed. And your strides are bigger than a human's, but you're not, blink dashing around like some other action RPGs. That slower pace could harm your gameplay flow. In this case, though, it works for the setting, it works with your combat, it forces you to commit, and it makes a beautiful harmony that feels Space Marine-y.
And also, there's a comparison you can make between Space Marine 2 and Gears of War. We're making it. We love Gears of War and we love Space Marine 2, but the things that also make them the same are just as many as the ones that make them different, right? They have huge shoulder pads, both, right? The character models look almost the exact same. But, yes. Cover, as he said, is one of the big ones, right? In Gears of War, melee is a quick, brutal thing that you're going to do sporadically, but not consistently.
Almost like a last resort kind of deal.
A lot of that gameplay is just shooting stuff until it gets in too close for comfort, getting yourself a moment to go back to shooting stuff. In Space Marine, it is a much more tighter blend of shooting stuff that's shooting me, fighting stuff that's fighting me, and going back and forth and popping in and out of both modes pretty regularly, and there's no cover for the most part. It is a lot of dodge, and by dodge, you mean sidestep, parry, kill a thing, execute a thing. Like, you are wanting to give yourself moments to breathe by committing executions to get a sliver of armor back, and then going back. And what that simulates for a Warhammer player, and what that's simulating for somebody who has read a bunch of Warhammer books, is every moment from one of these books where a dude is explaining how he has killed 20 Termagants, and then has to have a half a page description for fighting this specific Tyranid warrior, and then going back on to fight the rest of them. And at the end of this sequence in game, you have this much health left and no armor. And you're and you're like, how many times are we going to do this? And in the book, they ask that same question. And it's simulating that exact experience you have in these books, but in a video game. And that feels really, really appropriate for what we're all used to as Warhammer fans.
Because a Space Marine isn't just a rifleman, or is it just a melee combatant? They can do it all. So you're going to do it all in the game. And it fits. And again, it shirks modern game design, class-based stuff, where you only shoot or you only melee, but you're going to do them both. And it fits the setting. Another is the squad size. Online games are only getting bigger and bigger in terms of competitive matches and stuff. If you wanted to match modern trends, you would want big lobbies, right? You would want big multiplayer setups. You would want to have teams of 10, 15, 20, 25 people fighting other teams of 10, 15, 20, 25 people. Maybe even 50 on 50 to really get the simulation experience. Space Marine bucks that trend because in the lore, you're not rocking 100 Space Marines deep. All of them are elite. All of them are valuable. All of them are really hard to equip and arm and create to supply.
This isn't a Horus Heresy game, right? If it was a Horus Heresy game and we had 100 Space Marines versus 100 Space Marines on Prospero, all right, cool. Sure. This is set in the 42nd millennium, more than 10 millenniums later. There's a lot less Space Marines around, and that's why they have 6v6 in the PvP lobby.
And that is it. That's the biggest. And in the campaign, you get 3 guys total. It is you plus 2 brothers. That is all. That is your whole force to get the job done. And it bucks a lot of trends. It doesn't even do the 4-man Left 4 Dead trend. But it does feel appropriate. Because for you, if you work hard, your faith is strong, you are frantic, and you murder your way through everything, 3 is all you're going to need. And it also makes the story and the setting feel more intimate. It's not, army on point A. It is brothers. Kill that bug. And now you're really sort of zoning into just your little brother squad. Which, again, fits the narrative vibe of 40K incredibly well. They didn't have to lean into that, but they chose to. And all of that together, and in many other ways we haven't mentioned, I think is a wonderful example of putting the setting sort of at the top of the heap, so to speak, for all of the multitudes of decisions you have to make. And then once you commit to that hard, doing your best to just execute those really well to sell a flavor. And I think it does do so quite successfully.
I think one of the things it also does is it leans in on the story elements of its IP, right? It did not try to tell a story in a Warhammer setting. It looked at the Warhammer setting and went, what story can we tell for people who know about the setting and haven't experienced the setting? And they found something that fit both molds. I would not call the story of Space Marine 2 a magnum opus of Warhammer storytelling.
No. I mean, it's no Siege of Terra. That's very true.
But I will say that it's pretty good. It's what I expect from a Warhammer story, on a minimum, right? It's got a lot of the same tone, a lot of the same interesting development. It does something that a game like Darktide missed. Darktide gets a lot of the tone right, the setting, the art direction, the sound design.
World is so cool to just look around there. Beautiful.
All of that's great, but I cannot give 2 shits about what's actually happening in the Darktide game itself. because the story they even try to pitch you is pretty incoherent. But the story here is pretty easy to digest, while also having interesting elements to it and references to the greater lore in its entirety, which allows you to sort of understand what's going on as a Warhammer person, right? Like, if you've read a bunch of Warhammer books, you know where you're at here in the story. You know what's going on, right? You can see little nuggets that are left for you to go, oh, I recognize that. Oh, I recognize that. Oh, I recognize that. Like, I have a bunch of friends who are playing this game who don't play Warhammer, and I'm having to not play with them currently because I have to spend all of my time playing this game, stopping and smelling the promethium on every single level. Meanwhile, they're like, all right, we want to go forward in mission. I'm like, I'm going to spend 10 minutes looking at this Redemptor Dreadnought.
Oh, I love Redemptors.
I like Redemptor Dreadnoughts.
Joe, we want to go do the mission. No, but like, I want to hear every little snippet of secondhand dialogue from people on the ship. I've got to walk to every NPC to see if they say something to each other. I want to hear it all. Look at the astropathic relay, and look at how like all of this is finally realized in an actual form that isn't just like an art piece from 1996. It's very neat, ain't it? Like, look at all those bugs assaulting that bridge. Those Imperial Guardsmen are really holding it really well. Oh, look at the Chimera. Look at what's on that Chimera. Look what's on that Leman Rest. Look at the different sponsons of those different things that are set up and then put in the exact order where they would actually be being used in this scenario. Like, just actual moment from John and I playing together is we stopped and talked for no shit. Almost 10 minutes. Because on the ground was a bunch of dead guardsmen and a human heavy weapon emplacement that was on a little tripod. And for 10 minutes, we discussed and slightly argued whether or not this heavy weapon is a heavy stubber or a heavy bolter. We were like kicking it around in the game to get different angles to look at it. We're like, no, it's got a drilled barrel. It's kind of like a 50 cal. Oh, John's like, no, I think it's more of like a heavy situation. I don't know. Let's kick it around till we can see into the chamber. Like, do they have there's a belt feed. Can we see the belt feed? Oh, let's talk about the size of the projectile. Is it a bolt shell or not? We'd be a nightmare to play with. We'd kill the pacing, but it's really enjoyable for super dorks. But like, look at that. Like, that moment, the fact that it exists tells me that this is a success for people, for our demographic, right? For the people who want the cool Warhammer game, right? We started the episode talking about how so many Warhammer people go, wow, I want this game, but like this. And that is exactly what we got in this. I'm telling you, this game is if someone played God of War from, I think, was it 2017, 2016, something like that? And went around there. Yeah. The new, like, when they re-released God of War on PlayStation 4, right? They took that God of War, and then they took Gears of War, and they went, same game, in Warhammer. Like, that's all this is. Like, it really is. It's just those two things combined into this, boom, adds some, like, hub shooter stuff to it. But they've filled in all of those gaps with such dedication to the source material. It's pretty easy to overlook all the stuff they stole from the game industry. That's perfectly fine, right? Because they've combined it in a composed, well-delivered way. And there's game industry stuff involved as well, where like they're charging $60, and they're not charging for all their future updates or having game stuff locked behind Battle Pass. It's all cosmetics. Like, there's lots of other stuff going on there that makes it an even easier sell. But like, truly, a lot of people were willing to pay $60 for the opportunity to play a Space Marine for 10 hours, and then maybe a little bit with their buds in campaign missions, in like co-op missions, and maybe a little bit in a PvP. And they got exactly that. They got exactly what they wanted. And when this game got announced, this is what everyone wanted. And as it released, we also got everything we wanted. Mm-hmm. So it's just a good situation. They did the right thing. Yeah, it appeals to veterans and doesn't overstay its welcome. I think it's really good. And for me, like, the final thing that really denotes, and this is the hardest one to hit, I think, that denotes a really good Warhammer game, that shows me that, wow, they've hit something here, is when a game is so well made and is so compelling and sort of sticking to its setting that even new people who know absolutely nothing about Warhammer, or the setting it's in, knows zero, come in, play the game, and have a good enough time that they go, I don't know anything about this, but like, I'm kind of curious what these dudes are now. And through that, make them consider wanting to learn more about the setting as a whole.
Whether
Maybe
that's
sometimes also buy minis, but at least they want to go look at some of the fluff.
yeah, like maybe they go read a book, maybe they get an Audible subscription and they go like start the Horse Heresy, or that's quite a journey. Or
They read a Go Trek and Felix because they played Total War Warhammer. Like,
yeah, like and let's look at some previous examples of games in the Warhammer IP that did this right. Dawn of War.
Yep.
We'll start there. When I was younger, Dawn of War was most of my friends' introduction to Warhammer. It wasn't mine. But as soon as that came out, I was like, wow, here's a thing I can actually like go play at like an internet cafe, and there's just a representation of this thing that I've been seeing in these books.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And then a bunch of my friends did it. And then some of them got miniatures and we played the game. And then, like, later on, it was still the touchstone. For how many people? For what, like if you had a computer and you ever played RTS games, you knew about Dawn of War.
Mm-hmm.
You played it.
Was unavoidable.
There's so many people who got into Warhammer who just played Dawn of War.
For me, I think my first was Dawn of War 2,
Mm-hmm.
where it was, like, more squad-based. But that was really, really fun.
Yeah.
And pitched me into the game.
And it did a lot of the same stuff here, a lot of the same design stuff. It was a different style of game, right? But they did it, right? Another example is Warhammer Total War. That whole franchise, 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, all of them. Every single one. Nailed it.
That managed to not only save Warhammer Fantasy after it was killed as a game and brought it back, but also helped Age of Sigmar stay afloat. Like, there was a time in which, and I was in the hobby, where they had killed Warhammer Fantasy. It was gone. Gotten rid of it. And the Total Warhammer games are coming out, and everyone started playing those because they couldn't play Fantasy anymore. And then you started seeing YouTube lore channels popping up, explaining all the different stuff that you're seeing in the Total Warhammer games. And people were diving into that. And then there was a bunch of streamers for it. There was a bunch of other like fans of this thing where people were just like, I'm going to watch a 3-hour-long lore video about the Empire of Man on one screen while playing an Empire campaign on the other.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And I would argue most of the people who played Total War Warhammer knew nothing about Warhammer before getting there. They just probably liked RTS games and heard that this was a good RTS game. And then had enough fun with whatever, like, spiky elf faction they played and went, these guys are weird. I want to know a little bit about this general I'm playing. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to Google some Dark Elf lore. And that single-handedly brought enough people into the hobby that I wish I could know a dollar amount. It's impossible to know. But I would love to know how much goodwill and public knowledge those games brought in to Age of Sigmar and to Total War, the old world. Because maybe a little spicy take, I don't know if the old world would exist or be doing nearly as well as it is if Total War Warhammer games didn't exist over the past 10 years.
Yeah, I was around when Fantasy kicked the bucket. Like, they didn't kick that bucket because it was doing well. Like, even in my local shop, there was we had 40 people who played played Warhammer 40K. We had 4 who played Fantasy. It was a dying game. And then that IP got revitalized from a video game, and now it's doing well enough to have its own game system separate from the flagships. That does well. That has constant releases. Now, is it a re-release of old miniatures? Sure. But they're releases, and there's still some new ones coming out with it. That's pretty good.
From Dead, it's pretty good. And I don't think that would happen without the eyes from the video games that were incredible.
And I think you're going to see the same thing with this, right? Like, you're looking at Warhammer Space Marine 2, and I think the number on release was the highest amount of people playing concurrently was 270,000 people concurrently playing Space Marine 2 at the same time, which is almost 100,000 more players than total Warhammer 3. Like, that is a metric ton. And like the closest thing we had to a cool Warhammer game in recent memory before this, the Warhammer 40k game, was Helldivers 2. Um, like, I'm not even kidding. Like, it was Darktide, Helldivers 2, and now Space Marine 2, and everyone loves this sort of genre of dystopian sci-fi nightmare co-op action game. Like, it's a great time, and it's going to push people to want to play these games. Whether that's in the form of Kill Team, whether it's in the form of playing Warhammer 40k, whether it's the form of like reading the novels, any of that. Like, it's going to push them to want to do this. And I'm hoping that the success of this leads to some other stuff. Because I'm going to say, completely biased, that what I want more than anything is a Final Fantasy Tactics style game, but set in Warhammer 40k. I know Rogue Trader gets close.
It does.
But I want that.
You could hope. I don't know if that would be my pitch, but I'd try it.
I don't think it has a mass appeal, but it has a me appeal, and that's what matters. All right.
We're selfish here. Yeah, for me, like, I don't know how many people will convert to the actual hobby, because I think if you buy a $60 game and then you want to like maybe consider getting into this, and you see that like a box of 5 or 10 Space Marines is also $60, and you need a lot of them, that might be a big ask for people. But I do think a lot of folks will read books. Mm-hmm. I think books and lore channels and podcasts and like all of those things, that could raise the boat. Mm-hmm. I also think that like if people get interested from Space Marine 2, right? And they start looking into Warhammer, and then it leads them to discovering the miniatures game. And even if they look into it and decide that doesn't fit their budget, or it's not what they actually want to do, it's whatever, it might then open their eyes to the wider hobby that is tabletop wargaming, to other game systems that might work for them, to maybe still get the interest and grow the communities, just for other games that maybe fit them. And I think that is amazing. And it's the thing for me that is the biggest indicator, or at least it's the indicator I appreciate the most for a great Warhammer game, is that it is like the best open arm invitation to come take a look at this.
Yeah. I mean,
and I really, really hope that it is something that we as a community can respond to by like welcoming those people in as well and teaching them, helping them find stuff, talking them through the options, to see if maybe we can find some folks and cool hobby they'll really enjoy.
I mean, like we have seen content creators who only really do video game content talking about now wanting to get into this setting and this hobby because they played this game and had a blast.
It's amazing.
I'm excited to see how that goes. And I think this will not be the only story about this in the next couple of years, because I think a lot of game systems are starting to come around to this. I think Infinity is another option. I mean, they have an anime coming out that I think is going to do bonkers numbers for them.
Comparatively, especially with them being smaller. Yeah.
And any sort of attention that our little hobby of painting war Barbies and fighting them against each other like gets, the more likely it is we're going to continue getting support for the thing that we are enjoying playing.
And that's great for all of us. Mm-hmm. So, welcome people in, help them learn stuff. Be their walking bestiary for every Tyranid monster that they go, what is that?
What's a Hormagon? What's a Termagon? Let me explain to you in detail the difference.
Prepare to strap in. I was there on Ball when the Red Tower fell. God, it's so cool. It's so cool. And I'm just excited to see what this does for us as a community. And also me and my enjoyment of playing these video games and purging Xenos with friends. If you are at all on the fence on Space Marine, I hope we have convinced you to maybe consider it, and just dive in and see if it's for you. And if it's not for you, maybe just be a person to help funnel new folks through. We'd really appreciate it. You can funnel them to us or other content creators. We are going to be back to the hobby tables soon and continue playing more war games after we get our Space Marine 2 fix, which I'm going to be honest, we might be playing for longer than many of the other people are playing. And I think that's a feature, not a glitch. For now, though, that has been all of our opinions, bona fide and Kentucky Fried. We'll see you on the next one.